My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. I'm your host, Rick Clemons. You know that. You don't need to hear it every time, but one more quick little push here. Don't forget to join our Facebook group. We have that over there. It's 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk community, and we'd love to have you participating there as well. But what happens when you finally realize as a 40 plus guy that there's still so much inclusion work and so much conversation about racial justice and Christianity, and the list goes on and on and on. And sometimes you feel like, I think I need to go to church again. And maybe you need to go to church in a different way. Maybe it's kind of a second Sunday sort of thing. Like, I'm not going to do the Sundays the way I used to, but let's find a new version of how to do this. Well, I have a guest today, beautiful soul, who has done amazing work in our LGBTQ plus community, everything from going through his own conversion therapy experience that showed up on People magazine back in 2018, that really put a stake in the ground, like hoping and helping. That's what I love to say, when we can hope and help people. And that seems to be a big thing right now out in our world about let's bring hope back. But if we can help people hoping into being who they really want to be and helping them get there, I think that's one of the ways that I would say that Darren Calhoun, who is a digital pastor and worship leader, has stepped into his own world of building villages and bringing people together. And I can't wait to have this conversation, because I feel like Darren's got some soul to him that's going to help us really, truly open up these doorways to how do we be more open to the intersectionalities of racial justice, Christianity, LGBTQ, being human and seeing each other as humans. So I think it's time for me to shut up. Oh, by the way, guys, this is the first episode. Well, yeah, one of the first episodes that we're doing that there's also going to be the video format available on YouTube for you to see. So, yay, Darren waved hi. I'm waving hi. Yes, I know you guys are like, oh, Rick actually dressed up for this. Yeah, if I'm going to do video, I'm not going to be sitting around in my whole, little t-shirt with holes in it. So, Darren, my brother, welcome to 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk, man.
Hey, glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you have such a great smile, man. I mean, you just, what a beautiful smile. And that tells me there's a soul essence to you that through everything that you've done and things that you're doing out there in the world is really helping have that impact. So, well, let's just start at the beginning. You popped out of mama's womb and you're like, I'm going to go change the world. That's what I'm going to go do, right?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, we all have our rough starts. Little preemie. Doctors didn't think I was going to make it. Mom was like, "Nope, he's special." And so,
That's
from the
awesome.
beginning, I was defying the odds.
But isn't that interesting that when we come from those spaces of defying odds, as you so beautifully said, we also find that that is part of our calling. It is something that drew us forth. So when did you really realize that you were being called? What was that first time, even as a young man, you're like, I feel like I'm being called to be a person of impact, or I need to look through lenses that other people aren't looking through. I need to help people see things differently. Where did that start for you?
That is a really great question. I want to say the first time that I had a moment of appreciating the difference was probably like sixth grade. I had a teacher who really believed in me, and who I was kind of a nerdy, smart kid who always had like something to add to the lesson, and the kids in the class definitely did not appreciate that. But this teacher really, really pushed me. It was like, yeah, you're gonna be different. You're gonna know more. You're gonna do more. And he was probably the very first person. My sixth grade teacher, Mr. Mazuka, was the very first person to really encourage me and to just remind me that there's something more than the eye rolling and the disappointment of both teachers and my classmates.
So I'm curious, I'm making a little assumption based on his last name. So he must have been, I'm assuming, maybe a person that was not American, right? He was not necessarily of American descent, Would that
Um,
be a true assumption?
the short version is he was a white guy in a 99% black school.
Interesting.
But yeah, to everything I knew, he had an American accent. So
Interesting. Just the last name is Duke. I'm like, well, that's interesting. I wonder what his descent was. So, but
yeah,
why do you think he was such an advocate of what you just shared? Because that's a really special, at a sixth grade. I mean, all teachers in their own way are pretty special, but at a
yeah.
sixth grade level, to be sharing that kind of impact with you as a young man, why do you think that was his perspective?
Again, I've not spent much time thinking about it, but I do know he was one of the few teachers who could see me, right? Who could
Hmm.
actually push past. Like I didn't perform well in school because somewhere around second grade, I decided that I would kind of get back at those who were making fun of me by not performing, not showing them my goodness, if you will. And even though I trailed behind performing on tests and academics, it was very clear that I was knowledgeable. And he
Hmm.
did everything he could to cultivate that. He really pushed me to play softball with the team, or with the class when we would go out. Just things that I just thought, oh, I can't do that, or I'm
Right.
no good at that. And it really did spark the beginning of change for me.
Hmm. What was the most monumental change as a young man you started to see? I mean, was it as you started to identify in your own space as, your own gender and gender identity and sexuality? Or was there other things that, like, as a man of color, maybe that was something like, ooh, I'm different here, right? I'm
Yeah,
different out in the world.
no, so there were several things happening simultaneously, right? I grew up South Side Chicago, 99% black neighborhood. Like I said, like certain teachers and administrators may have been white,
Hmm.
and but otherwise it was all black. And I remember kind of having this switch from being in a private school to a public school and just having a horrible experience, and already at sixth grade having suicidal ideation. Sorry to
Mm.
just jump right in there, right? But
Wow.
I remember, I remember in part not wanting to disappoint certain people who were
Hmm.
significant, like my best friend at the time, and folks like my teacher who seemed to really believe in me. And even though continued to struggle back and forth all the way into high school is kind of where I realized that people are wishy washy and weird, and I had
You
more
think?
people. Yeah, right. And, even though I didn't fit in and, there's certainly I I I think it was just typical to tease kids about not being masculine enough, but,
Hmm.
even though I was starting to have the inklings of my sexual orientation, I didn't know what that meant, it didn't apply yet, but I was certainly used to feeling like other, and I was certainly used to
Mm.
not fitting in. But in high schools where I found the first opportunities to let my skills and talents shine without
Yeah.
it being the way that the jocks did or the nerds did. I was just in my
Mm-hmm.
own little lane with my own little crew, and I had several opportunities to lead, whether it was student council or whether it was in church youth groups. I found myself leading at a very young age.
It's such an interesting perspective you just threw out there, like your own little lane, your own little crew. Because one of the things I see in the world, but especially in the LGBTQ community at times, is I just can't fit in. I just can't fit in.
Hmm.
Whether you're young gay, I hear this actually a lot right now in the 40 plus crowd. Like,
Oh
the young
yeah.
ones don't really appreciate us, like, for our knowledge and the history, but then the older ones, we're kind of in our own little groups.
Hmm.
And so friendship and making friends is a really big thing for guys in the 40 plus realm. And obviously relationships, getting into relationships, etc. But when
Right.
you said own little lane and own little crew, sometimes I feel like especially as gay men, we're like, we want to be part of the
Yeah.
big thing, right?
Right.
Okay, nothing wrong with that. But sometimes we put such a high expectation on that
Hmm.
then we're like, I can't attain that. I can't attain that. Instead of settling like, okay, well, where's my little lane? Where's my little crew? So that's why I wrote that down. That's why anybody watching is like, why is Rick doing something? Because when I hear a guest say something really powerful, it's such a cool thing to capture and go, how can we use this to
Hmm.
help heal our own wounds? Like if I can
Hmm.
accept myself in my own little lane with my
Right.
own little crew, and I find happiness there,
Yeah,
what a beautiful thing that can happen. So I know
exactly.
that you've done so many amazing, beautiful things, but one of the things that probably was one of the biggest things is the whole ex-gay conversion.
Oh,
So
yes. I love the
that
voice change
had
for that.
well, yeah, it's just I have interviewed many people who've been through it, and many people who were on that side of it, who
Mhm.
were, ex-gay conversion people, who now on the other side, like, oh my gosh, I'm as gay as anybody, and man, putting people through that.
Yeah.
What was the hardest aspect of first being led into that, and then leading yourself out of that? Because I think that's
Yeah.
something really important for people to hear.
Definitely. If we continue from this idea of finding belonging, finding a place to fit in, there are ways that we get socialized. And me, as a
Mhm,
17-year-old who um, ended up co-founding this campus ministry on my college campus, the idea of fitting in and being unique and special and being called, if you will, those are very appealing, right? And
mhm,
so I found myself with one other guy starting this campus ministry and people being drawn to us. And
mhm,
while I was in high school, I had that switch of, oh, if I just do my own thing, people will be drawn to me. But
right,
now I have this connection, this transcendence, this, oh, God really wants something specific. And you get lured in.
mhm,
It draws you in. It makes you feel like, oh, my life really has purpose and meaning. And I still think that's true, right? I still think that
sure,
there are ways that God shows up and gives us maybe unique or special things. But at the same time that that's true, people can misuse and misalign that energy and that willingness you have. So the
mhm,
part of me that wanted to be a man, the part of me that wanted to be a good leader, the part of me that desired uh sorry, my alarm went off. The part of me that desired all of this connection and purpose and that transition into adulthood really got capitalized on by somebody who I now would consider a narcissist, who is leading what I now consider a cult. um
mhm,
and most people don't think of churches, at least Christian churches, they don't think of them as cults. But it's easy to go to kind of be in this place that's a high control environment. It's easy to be in this place where they're telling you, oh, if you listen to me, you'll have what you need. You'll have the calling of God, you'll have the blessings of God, you'll be used by God. And again, as a 17 turning 18-year-old, of course you would want that. Of
of
course you would,
course.
like, pursue that, if you will. But it would be quite some time and many, many disappointments, almost 8 years later, before I realized I am just trying to serve these people. I am just trying to win the approval of these people, and God keeps reminding me that I am approved and loved regardless of what these people think, say, or do. And that
Mm,
was the breaking point. That was the point where I decided, well, I can either trust these people and give up more and more of my life endlessly, or I can trust that God's been doing something since before these people existed and that I could pursue that. And thank God that was the road I chose to pursue God
mhm,
and to pursue the relationship and the truth that I was resonating with, rather than getting stuck in the endless approval of people.
mm. Very fascinating and very powerful. I mean, when you said approved and loved, it took me a lot of places because I
Hmm.
think for most of us as LGBTQ individuals, and especially gay men, I feel like, and
Hmm.
I'm not saying we're not owning that street corner in the world. Okay. I get that. But we kind of do in some ways because
Yeah.
this masculinity piece is such a big part of like gay men. And then when we're told this is the only way you can be approved and loved, in
Hmm.
society, and when we embrace that, you know, this higher being, God, however anybody wants to see through that, is there's an approval and love just for who you are and how you
Hmm.
exist. Doesn't mean we're not, all free of sin and all that sort of stuff, but it's such a beautiful space to come into that realization.
Yeah.
And I was raised in fundamental Seventh day Adventist upbringing. So it
Oh,
was
fun.
yeah, very much, like, this is the way we're going to be. And it was tough.
Yeah.
I didn't go through any conversion therapy,
Great.
but I had my moments with church pastors and stuff, like getting me through this. And I finally, I'm not going to go into it because most of the listeners have heard this before, but went back in the closet, came out later. And one of the
Mhm.
things that was the most moving piece for me in my mid 30s, when I knew things were about to shift, was I really started having these conversations with God in a different way. Like, help me understand,
Mhm.
if this isn't who I really am, then
Yeah.
why is this so prevalent in my essence and my being?
Yeah.
And in the stillness of some of those conversations, when I finally realized there's nothing actually talking back to me saying there's something wrong with me, that was a
Right.
big shift for me. It was almost
Mhm.
like, to your beautiful words, approved and loved. I was realizing I was loved no matter what. Doesn't mean I'm still
Exactly.
not, I'm not perfect. I'm a human, but I think this is the thing. And as you said, approved and loved, I think it's really interesting that then, as a gay culture, we men, like, we're
Mhm.
waiting for approval, we're waiting to be loved, we're waiting for the guys to really embrace us. And it's like, are we really surprised? Even if you haven't had a
Yeah.
deep religious upbringing, it's a societal upbringing that says, in fact, um, during the DNC convention, I remember Barack Obama basically saying something to that, like, we are a society who lives on approval and wanting to be seen, right? But what
Mhm.
happens when we embrace, we are approved and we are seen? Our whole energy shifts. We are so
Yeah.
much more open to being who we are meant to be in the world. And part of your journey to
Absolutely.
being who you are in the world was stepping in and really beginning to claim all these beautiful things. Your Second Sunday podcast, your Make Love Matter campaigns in the Chicago area, serving Black gay men. How did that really begin to shift things for you personally as you started to be that essence, that light bearer, that torch bearer out there in the world? How did things shift for you?
Yeah. So one of the bittersweet parts of my conversion therapy experience is that the church I was a part of actually did train me and many others in grassroots community organizing. And
Mm,
so here in Chicago and specifically on the South Side, we were doing anti-violence work. We were understanding the systemic pieces that created the not only the poverty in my neighborhood, but also the inescapable cycle of people coming from jail, coming back into the community with no kind of support or repair, and then being barred by laws from doing things like hauling swine or becoming a barber, just basic ways
mm,
to care for yourself. And so, in learning how to affect those laws, learning how the systems connect to the beliefs, the disconnection from history changes how we assume our neighborhoods got to be bad. It wasn't, oh, we don't, Black people don't take care of our neighborhoods. It was, no, it was German and Jewish people who were formerly considered not white, who once they got into whiteness were able to slumlord the neighborhoods,
mm,
and the laws then backed them up because they were now quote unquote white, and we couldn't
mm,
get that kind of legal support. So it's like, oh, there's more
mm,
to this. And policy tends to be at the foundation. And so when I moved from the church that was spiritually abusing me to another church that had good intentions about how to care for me but could not actually love me the way I needed, that church is where I had to advocate for myself as a gay man who was a
mhm,
Christian. And they were like, "Oh, we love you. We want to walk with you." But then you've got these policies that are hitting time bombs waiting to go off. And it's like, but nothing changed about me. You changed your mind. You changed
right.
your policy interpretation and never gave me access, never gave me a voice, never gave me autonomy and agency. And so I had to advocate for myself, which got me into this place of using that grassroots organizing training to then speak truth to power, to speak to the church elders, which led to speaking to other churches and led to doing this advocacy work in the LGBTQ Christian space. It was like, yeah, I've learned about what oppression looks like and how insidious it
Mhm,
is, and now I've got to use it to lead myself to freedom along with many others.
mm. But don't you think that's what inclusivity and justice is truly about? Is about helping bring everybody into a space of at least some form of empathy, some form of seeing each other. We're such a polarized world right now. And I'm guilty of it too. There's days I'm like, fuck it. I am not going to talk to anybody on the other side. There's no way. Right. And then I step back and, I have to really do some soul searching, like, but what is that accomplishing? What is that accomplishing by just staying there? And I love this grassroots approach that you have brought up, Darren, because sometimes it can be as simple, here we are, we're just a few weeks away from, the election here in the US. And all throughout this time, I've been thinking, but what can I do? I mean, I definitely contribute money. That's one way. But sometimes it's just being very open about who I am. I don't have to get in somebody's face. I don't have to say, here, you have to accept me. But I've always been pretty good about just showing up and being like, yeah, my husband and I did this or whatever. The more we normalize who we are, which is easy for me being a cisgender white male. Okay. I happen to be gay. It's a different story for people of color because it's just, it's blatantly out there, right? You are who you are in a really beautiful way, but for some people it's not. So how do you extend the olive branch? And I'm talking even in our own community, because we would be remiss if we did not talk about the person of color challenges within our own LGBTQ community, which is just always such a head scratcher to me. I'm like, come on. But
AKA
how do you find
that of whiteness? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, exactly. But how do you find, if you were going to give somebody a little piece of advice here, how do you extend the olive branch, or how do you show up, as that grassroots person in your daily life?
Yeah. And I like the way you started that from where you're figuring out what can I do? How do I show up? I personally believe that everyone has a role in making the world a better place, that it's not that everyone has to be on the front lines. It's not that everyone has to go to a protest. It's not that everyone has the money to contribute, but we all have something unique we could do. And remembering that our stories matter, remembering that we can share parts of ourselves. For many years, I called my story sharing bleeding in public. This idea that I'm going to show you my wounds. I'm going to show you my scars, and it does cost me to do that. It does hurt. It it impacts me, but in doing so, there are a lot of people who'd love to argue about abstract concepts, but it's much harder to argue about someone's lived experience. And being in the place where I could share my lived experience and do it in a way that isn't overtly harmful to me really did open a lot of doors and really did some long-term seed planting to cause people to be like, you know what? I didn't want to hold Darren accountable to this rule. I didn't even believe in it, but I was just following the rule. And the rule never made sense, but it didn't matter until it applied to someone that they loved and cared about, until they had to really put flesh and bones behind these statutes and these policies. And so it was finding how can I make the policies into reality? How can I move people from the apathy of, oh, this is just a rule, it doesn't matter, to, oh, this rule is affecting someone I love, and that is something that I care about, and I don't want to sit idly by. So moving from apathy to empathy, from empathy to action, is my idea of find the place where your heart shows up. Find the place where this matters to you, and then figure out what is your action that you can take accordingly.
I love that. Apathy to empathy, empathy to action. You're kind of doing some Oprah stuff here, man. I'm just saying, it's like she would be going, that's a tweet. There's that tweetable moment.
Right.
Except I guess we call it an Xable moment these days, or whatever that is.
Yeah,
but,
no, I'm not using the word X. It's tweets.
It's tweets. I don't care what they say. It's still tweets. That's the way it's going to go down. But it's interesting when we hold ourselves accountable to something like this. Like, okay, if I can say, I really want to be a really empathetic person. And then the bitch inside my head goes, not today. You're being pushed, right? But then I'm like, but how does that help me move forward and take the right action if I can't even be empathetic to somebody's, I might as well just stay really apathetic and like, nope, not gonna do it. I'm just gonna, and that's a form of apathy in my mind. It's like when you're so ground in, like you just like, this is the way. And my apathy says I'm going to sit and do it. Exactly. It's not, and apathy can also be, I'm going to roll over, curl up and be in the fetal position, right? There's just these interesting spaces.
Yeah.
But to your point there, I find it really interesting too, how everything you're talking about can actually work for us as gay men in our day-to-day lives. If you're
Absolutely.
apathetic about not being able to find a relationship, and you're not empathetic around like giving yourself some room to realize maybe your bar's too high, maybe you're not trusting that you're an introvert, so this isn't going to be, all these things are never going to help you get into action. But when you start to embrace yourself and be empathetic to your pursuit of a relationship, or empathetic to finding your circle within the gay community, you can actually start to take some actions. And it's such a beautiful thing. And even though we're talking about your grassroots efforts and helping other, Black gay men and the impact you're having in social justice and making love louder and all these different things, I love this because it shows how you can actually take everything you've shared, Darren, and put it in to your own personal life as a gay man, about your careers, your relationships, your money issues,
Exactly.
your health and wellness. You
Exactly.
have to have empathy for yourself to get you out of that quote apathy. And apathy to me always comes up as a coach when somebody's like, I just can't get past this. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
yay. We get to
Right.
go step into like this beautiful space of, let's go see what's causing you to just lay there in that fetal position, so to speak, right?
Right.
Let's really uncover it.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of grace in that, right?
Mm,
The when we show up curious about what's happening that we don't want to move, um, and I mean genuine curiosity. We want to know, what is that like? What does it feel like? What is it protecting something, right?
mhm.
Like sometimes we have a kind of perfectionism
Yep.
that is protecting the version of ourselves that was never good enough.
Good enough.
Or
Exactly.
sometimes we sometimes when it comes to even like political things, a lot of people who join like far right extreme groups don't believe in the far right extreme group. They were
Mhm.
looking for the inclusion,
Connection,
the
inclusion.
belonging,
Yep.
the connection. And
Mhm.
the majority of them actually leave after 3 years because they were like, I just don't believe this. And I just wanted
Right.
some friends. Right. So to figure out where is the thing that we need to sit with, what is the part of ourselves that we're protecting? Is it that we're afraid of losing? Are we afraid of not having enough? Are we afraid of not looking good enough or being
Mhm.
enough? And then if we find out, if we deal with that piece, then that
Mhm.
is what opens us up. That is what gives us the space to show up with other people and connect with other people, or to get the support we need. Because sometimes we do need that support. We do need a coach. We do need a therapist. We might need
Mhm.
some medication, but whatever it is, we have to have that grace with ourselves enough to be like, why am I this way?
Well, you just said the word though. It's the grace. Sometimes we are so freaking hard on ourselves. There is no room for
Hmm.
grace.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting concept to talk to some people about, especially if they haven't been in the, I'm going to just say kind of in the faith world, because that word
Hmm.
grace comes up a lot in different faiths,
Hmm.
right?
It can be loaded.
It can be very loaded. Yes, absolutely. It can be, I mean, it's a word that triggers me. It's
Yeah.
one that if I'm not in the right frame of mind and somebody says it, it's kind of like when somebody says I'm a Christian, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna slap the shit out of you, which isn't the right way to be either, right? But sometimes it's
You
that
know?
grace where you got to
Christians have
give
earned a
yourself.
reputation.
Not all Christians. I'm going to say yes, Christians have, but not all. I want to caveat that because that's part of the reason I'm glad you're here, because you
Yeah.
are a guy who is a guy of faith and a Christian, it always bugs me, Darren, when people in our own community are like, no, you can't be gay and Christian. You're on the wrong side. I'm like, um, no, you can, you can. You can't be gay and Christian in the way that you perceive gay and Christian to
Right.
be, because there's a trigger, and I get that piece. I'm not knocking that, guys. Any of you are listen. I think what Darren in that space is actually inviting you into is have the grace to go explore. And I love that you brought up the word
Mhm.
curiosity. It's one of my
Yeah.
favorite things, because here's the thing as a coach that I've learned throughout all the years of coaching. The reason most people get stuck in stuff or they're in that spiral is because they're not curious.
Mhm.
They're not really truly exploring what they can do, what they can get the answers to, how they can
Mhm.
have a conversation with somebody, how they can open themselves to vulnerability. What would happen if I did get curious and was vulnerable? What would
Mhm.
happen if I had a powerful conversation with a partner who I feel like the relationship isn't working, but I don't have the curiosity to go, how can I explore that with them without it's the
Yeah.
explosion, right?
Yeah.
Although explosions can work really well too. Sometimes you have to have the explosion to
Right.
get
It's the both
where you're
and.
going. Yeah, it is the both and for sure. So
But
I'm really
I
curious. Go ahead,
mhm.
man.
Oh, I was gonna say, I also wanna put one more piece in that. You gave the caveat, not all Christians, and there are
Mm,
many versions of that today, especially like not all men, or not
right.
all white people, or not all black people, whatever it is. Um, there's a way that society teaches us that we need to defend things, right?
Mm,
You see people like going bonkers on the internet about whatever the latest scandal is, or people upset about the Paris Olympics and feeling like they need to
mhm.
defend God, right?
Right, right.
That I believe that comes from values that we get from Western white dominant society
Hmm.
that are distracting to what we really need to do. Like, to be curious is also to put on pause some of that defense. Like,
Yes.
so when people, for example, when people say Christians are horrible, I don't bother disagreeing with them or defending Christianity. And in doing so, my experience has been that I get invited into the atheist spaces. I get
Hmm.
invited into the spaces where people don't like Christianity anymore. My band is a band that's rooted in the ideas of Christianity, but people who are done with Christianity and done with institutional church like my band because we
Hmm.
don't try to defend God. We're not trying to defend anything. We're just like, hey, what does it look like to love? What does it look like to sit with unanswered questions? Right? The
Hmm.
the things that people can resonate with, and by doing so, we show another way without causing the strife that we keep just going back and forth about. So, it's just it's just one of those free little tidbits of if we can pause the knee-jerk way that we've been socialized to defend something, I think there's something more on the other side of that. But it
Yep.
does require us to, like, take a step back and just be like, "Hey, yeah, I'm a man, but I don't have to defend men. Men have been harmful and murderous to
Hmm.
them to a lot of people. And
Right.
if instead of me defending men, I just show up as a good man without having to announce myself, then I think that makes a much bigger impact than trying to get somebody to stop being negative about men."
I love this piece of curious causes the defense to pause. That's absolutely brilliant. And it as you said it, I'm like, I get it because I in my other world, I help speakers build their public speaking business. And one of the things I'm
Mhm.
always trying to break a speaker of is when you're on stage, don't be the wanderer. You don't have to keep moving. You do not have to walk all the time. You do not have to do this, right? And I always preface it like, and this is where the curiosity piece comes in. I'm like, okay, so let's just say I was working with you, Darren. I'm like, so Darren, I love what you're doing on stage. I love the content's great. You're speaking. I'm curious, why do you feel the need to move so much?
Mhm.
And it's such an interesting thing because I'm not saying you need to stop moving. In a
Mhm.
way, I am. It's a silent little bitch slap there. Like, why are you doing this? Right.
Uh-huh.
But it's such an interesting thing because it's like, oh, am I moving a lot? Well, I'm just curious. There's a lot of movement. And, if I'm in the right setting where like we will have been filming as they're doing something, like, yeah, come over here to the camera. Let's roll
Mhm.
back and watch. It's such a beautiful thing because we realize that curiosity has lots of answers. I'm
Right.
nervous. Well, I've seen
Mhm.
all other speakers, lots of speakers move on stage a lot, right? Well,
Mhm.
actually, a really amazing speaker moves with intentionality. And when
Right.
you think about what you just brought up, this curious helps us pause the defensiveness. It's the yin yang. You
Mhm.
cannot be defensive and then ask a question without suddenly the defense coming down. It's
Right.
such an interesting thing, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like you can't have a positive and a negative thought at the same exact time. It's impossible. Because as soon as you have a negative thought and you go, well, but what if
Mhm.
suddenly the negativity starts to come down? It may not go completely away, but the energy of it starts to shift. And I
You start to regulate. Yeah.
right. And that regulation is so powerful. And as someone that has done so much out there in this advocacy, racial justice, intersectionality of everything, you can tell, at least I can tell by how you are speaking and articulating and sharing today, that if we were just more curious as humans about other humans, so much of
Absolutely.
what you brought up, the apathy could go away, the empathy could show up, the grace, the
Mhm.
being in the right action, that curiosity being awakened, all of these things would help us as a humanity find ourselves being so much less defensive. And especially in our world of gay men, there's a lot of defensiveness that goes on, especially in those online spaces. I'm like, really?
Yep.
It's interesting. I did a video. Oh, it's probably been 2 months ago. A simple little video like, hey, here's something I see going on a lot. There's a lot of throwing shade on social media in our gay communities, on Grindr, on Scruff, in any online community where gay men gather. There's a lot of shade. So, and I use the word curious. I'm like, so I'm really curious. What does that do for you? How does that actually make you feel when you're doing that? How do you think that makes the other person feel? So just simple like that was probably about the extent of the whole video, right?
Yep.
And of course, I triggered somebody. It was obvious. I don't know if it was somebody in our community, but it was on YouTube, and they wrote back, well, this isn't just a gay thing. I don't know why you feel like it has to be a gay thing. And I'm like,
not all gays, right?
Not all gays. I just said, hey, this is something I noticed. It's like, it's just, and I get it. I respect that comment, but it's like, of course, it came from somebody who has no profile pic. They have one, you can see where I'm going with this whole thing, right? So I'm curious for you, Darren, before we wrap everything up, given all these experiences and the beautiful stuff that you bring, Second Sunday podcast, all the work you do, what makes you most alive as a gay Black man? And I didn't put the Black in there, guys, because I wanted to call him out, but there's a reason behind that question, because there's things that I feel as a gay white man that really bring me alive. So I'm curious, what brings you really alive?
Yeah, if I could put it into a quick story format, just last night, I had the opportunity. I produce a show called Toy with Me, and it's a local show in Chicago in partnership with one of the leather organizations, Onyx Midwest and Project Vita. And this show was just about cruising, and it's a safer sex education kind of talk style YouTube podcast. And in this conversation, I am using my creative talents to produce the show. I am bringing in my friend who came as a guest on to talk about cruising. I am getting other people involved because we do testing and we do all kinds of opportunities for people to get connected to care through the show. And afterward, like my friend and I were just talking about the experience and talking about the 20 years of history we have together. And I realized it's like that is what I want to do. I want to bring all my pieces together. I want to bring my spirituality and my sexuality and my creativity and my leadership. I want all those things happening together. And I've been really, really fortunate, blessed, how you want to term it. But I've had the amazing opportunity that my whole life, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always been somebody who's been working to create the kinds of things that I want to be a part of. And I'm like, it's not perfect. I'm not rich, but I am doing exactly what I want to be doing. And even if I have to change where I'm doing it or who I'm doing it with, I am really confident. I'm like, this is what I'm here for. This is what I'm great at. This is what I love to do. And so just again, bringing together all those pieces of me, the pieces that had to be separate, the spirituality had to be separate from the sexuality, and the creativity. Well, that's professional. You don't bring your professional into your play life. It's like, no, we're talking about cruising and I'm making it look good. Right. And how to reduce your harm in the midst of it, right?
Just in that what you just said, and I know there's going to be some guys that like, I would never cruise. I'm like, bitch,
and you don't
would
have
too.
to, right?
But you don't have
you might
to,
never,
right?
but you don't have to.
And the beauty is, but how by hearing how somebody can see this as playful, I'm getting, I don't know. By the time this show airs, I may have already interviewed this other person, but and I can't, and of course, my 61-year-old brain's going dead right now, but
all right.
she does it's not Hello Kittens, but it's like, I don't know, she has a brand that's called Kitten something, okay? And now she's launching this new part that's for gay and bisexual men. And what she does is she hosts these events that invite them to come in, and they're okay, we're going to call them kind of sex events, but they're like done at such a high level that there's a beautiful essence to how she positions these so that men can come in and be free. And if they want to explore kink, or they want to explore that feminine piece of themselves, or they want to step into whatever it is that awakens this beautiful, sensual, sexual self within them. And it's such a beautiful thing because she's found a way to take that creativity and the essence of spirituality and sexuality and all this stuff and bring it together. And when we find this, and as you were saying this, I was just watching you and your face and everything, and I'm like, there's pure joy.
Absolutely.
I love that you also said, I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination. Guys, I make no money off of this freaking podcast, okay?
Right.
Very little. Well, I shouldn't say that, because most of my money that comes from this podcast is guys that come and coach with me. So I do make money from it, but I'm not getting sponsorships, all that stuff. It's it's not ever been about that for me. It's like having these beautiful conversations like we are, and being able to share guests like you that are like, here's what I'm doing. And it's not to say, okay, now go follow Darren. He's got it all figured out, because he is perfect. I know he said he's not, but no, I'm kidding. But well, I'm not kidding, because there's an essence to you that's like, you're centered. You've found your center. I know that doesn't always stick, because my center doesn't always stick either. There's days I'm like,
it moves. It can change.
Moves. I know. Isn't that interesting? The center can move. When I said that to a client one day in a session, I'm like, well, your center is going to move. He goes, well, then it's not in the center. That's the whole point. Your center is going to move so you can come back to a new center and discover what it is. But well, Darren, thank you, man. I'm so glad you came here today and shared yourself, and been the first one that we recorded a live video for. It's been awesome. Woo-hoo. If somebody wants to reach out to you and learn more about Second Sunday and all the work you're doing, I'm assuming DarrenCalhoun.com is one of the best places to find everything about you.
Yep. And of course, secondsundaypod.com is where season 1, episode 1 is my story of surviving conversion therapy as well.
And how many, so how long has Second Sunday been around? I mean,
it was 3 years in the making. We've got 2 seasons out. We just completed season 2, and then we are looking for our funding for season 3.
Very cool.
Absolutely.
I love podcasting. It's such a fun thing, and it's such a way to tell stories and get people in and
Truly.
give people something they need to do. And, I'm glad that you're part of it, and that you shared yourself, and that you showed up here fully for us today. So once again, Darren, thank you so much for being here, man. So
glad to be
appreciate
here,
you.
Thank you. Appreciate you too.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Here we go. But come back in another week, and it's about time for that music to roll. So we'll catch you in just a week, guys. And again, come join our Facebook group, 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk community, and would love to see you there as well.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.